Comme vous savez, le saxophone a été inventé par Adolphe Sax à Bruxelles entre 1838 et 1840.
As you probably already know, the saxophone was invented by Adolphe Sax in Brussels between the years 1838 and 1840.
En octobre 1842, Sax quitte la Belgique pour faire carrière à Paris.
In October 1842, Sax left Belgium and he moved to Paris to carry on his career there.
En 1855, les saxophones sont adoptés aux USA par Patrick Gilmore dans les bandes civiles et militaires.
In 1855, saxophones were adopted in the United States by Patrick Gilmore in both the civil and the military bands.
En 1857, et pendant 13 ans, Adolphe Sax enseigne les 4 principaux saxophones dans une classe annexe du Conservatoire de Paris.
In 1857, for about 13 years, Adolphe Sax taught the 4 principal saxophones in an annex class at the Conservatory of Paris.
Le saxophone, grâce à ses qualités reconnues, est employé à Paris dans une trentaine d'ouvrages lyriques importants, joués par des élèves privés de l'inventeur, notamment par Henri Will, Jean-Baptiste Soile, Louis Mayer.
The saxophone, thanks to its well-known qualities, was used in Paris in about 30 important operatic works, played for the most part by students, private students of the inventor, notably by Henry Weil, Jean-Baptiste Soile, and Louis Mayer.
Le plus remarquable d'entre eux est Louis Mayer.
The most remarkable of them is Louis Mayer.
C'est grâce à lui et à son talent que le saxophone est présent dans Hamlet et dans Françoise de Rimini d'Ambroise Thomas, dans l'Arlésienne de Georges Bizet, Sylvia de Léo Delibes et dans 4 opéras de Jules Massenet, Le Roi de Lahore, La Vierge, Hérodiade et Werther.
It's thanks to Louis Mayer's talent that the saxophone is present in important operatic works such as Hamlet and in Françoise de Rimini by Ambroise Thomas, in L'Arlésienne by Georges Bizet, in Sylvia by Léo Delibes, and in 4 other operas by Jules Massenet, the King of Lahore, the Virgin, Hérodiade, and Werther.
Louis Mayer est tellement exceptionnel qu'à sa mort, le saxophone ne cesse d'être employé dans les ouvrages lyriques. Massenet, qui jusqu'en 1892 l'avait superbement utilisé dans 4 de ses ouvrages majeurs, ne l'utilise plus dans ses 16 derniers opéras.
Louis Mayer was such an extraordinarily talented person that after he died, the saxophone ceased to be used in operatic works. Massenet, who until 1892 had used so superbly the saxophone in many of his major works, didn't use it again in the 16 last operas that he wrote.
Je vous propose d'écouter un extrait d'Hamlet d'Ambroise Thomas dans lequel le saxophone est brillamment utilisé et malheureusement, très souvent ce solo est supprimé. Même au XIXe siècle, c'était très rare de l'entendre.
We're going to play an example for you of one of these operatic excerpts. This one is from Ambroise Thomas, Hamlet. It's unfortunate that this excerpt is often left out of the opera when it's often cut from the final production because it utilizes an extra instrument in the orchestra.
extrait de Werther, où le saxophone joue avec l'air de Charlotte dans l'air des lettres.
Another excerpt is from Werther, where the saxophone plays accompanying the heroine Charlotte in her role.
À la mort d'Adolphe Sax, en 1894, le saxophone n'est utilisé que dans les harmonies et fanfares de France et d'Amérique du Nord. Il n'est pas reconnu dans les pays sous influence germanique.
After the death of Adolphe Sax in 1894, the saxophone, which was not well known in the countries under the influence of Germany, was used rarely except for in harmonies and brass bands in France and North America.
Son déclin en France se remarque surtout depuis la défaite de la France en 1870 dans la guerre avec la Prusse.
The decline was remarked all over France for the saxophone after the defeat of France in 1870 in the war with Prussia.
En effet, le nombre de saxophonistes décroît si gravement dans le pays qu'il a vu naître que les surplus de saxophones se vendent au prix du cuivre sur le marché à la ferraille.
The number of saxophonists decreased so much that in the country where it was born, the saxophone finished by all the people that owned them ended up selling them for the cost of brass on a common market.
Faute d'exécutants, les pièces écrites pour saxophone au XIXe siècle tombent dans l'oubli. Dans les grands opéras, le saxophone joué par des non-spécialistes est le plus souvent supprimé et remplacé par un autre instrument.
With the lack of expert professional players, the pieces written for the saxophone in the 19th century fell into forgotten pieces. In the big important operas, the saxophone, which might have been played by a non-specialist of the saxophone, is even more quickly taken out and replaced by another instrument.
À Paris, François Combel, jeune musicien de la garde républicaine, est pratiquement seul à se faire remarquer en soliste dans d'aimables morceaux de salon.
In Paris, François Combel, a young musician of the Garde Republicaine band, was practically the only person who was remarkable as a soloist in pieces that were mostly played in salon type events.
Pour nombre de compositeurs, s'intéresser sérieusement au saxophone est inutile et à coup sûr dévalorisant.
For a number of composers who were seriously interested in the saxophone, saw it becoming useless and it became devalued.
Aux USA, la virtuosité de l'instrument est particulièrement mise en valeur par les saxophonistes des bands que dirigent Patrick Gilmore et John Philip Sousa, ainsi qu'au vaudeville par de nombreuses femmes saxophonistes, telles Esther Morgan, Bessie McLean, Isabelle Taliaferro, Laura Meana et d'autres encore.
In the United States, the virtuosity of the instrument was particularly notable by saxophonists who played in the bands directed by Patrick Gilmore and John Philip Sousa, as well as in vaudevillian groups where a number of female saxophonists performed, such as Esther Morgan, Bessie McLean, Isabel Talaferro, and Leora Meana, as well as others.
Il faut savoir que le saxophone n'est adopté dans le jazz qu'en 1917-1918, à la fin de la Première Guerre mondiale.
An important thing to note is that the saxophone was not adopted into the music of jazz in 1917-18. Only at the end of the World War I is when the saxophone was beginning to be used in jazz.
Parmi les solistes que révèle John Philip Sousa aux États-Unis, on peut mentionner Édouard Lefebvre, Jean Meuremans, Ben Anton.
Among the soloists that were made well known by John Philip Sousa, we know Edward Lefebvre, Jean Mormont, and Benny Henton.
Nous avons des enregistrements de l'un d'eux, de ces premiers saxophonistes, de Jean Meuremans, un enregistrement de 1900, les variations sur le carnaval de Venise.
We do have one recording of one of those performers, Jean Mermons, which was recorded in about 1900, of one of the very early recordings, and this is of the Carnival of Venice.
Meuremans était d'origine belge.
Meuremans was born in Belgium.
En 1900, le saxophone n'est plus en France qu'un instrument de musique militaire. Dans les pays d'Europe où prédomine l'influence germanique, il continue d'être ignoré.
By 1900, the saxophone was no longer used in France except for as a military band instrument. In the countries of Europe, mostly predominated under a German influence, they continued to ignore the existence of the saxophone.
C'est dans ce contexte hasardeux qu'apparaît aux États-Unis Elise Hall, femme passionnée qui crée de façon inattendue un répertoire de musique de concert pour le saxophone, répertoire jusque-là inexistant.
It's in this very hazardous context that appeared Elise Hall, a woman of great passion who wanted to create something that hadn't existed before, a repertory of music for concert music for saxophone that was now going to be new to the scene, had never existed.
Elise Hall, née Boyer, est issue d'une riche famille américaine de Boston. Elle naît à Paris le 15 avril 1853 et reçoit à Boston une éducation soignée et de qualité. En 1879, elle se marie avec le docteur Richard Hall, chirurgien réputé.
Elise Hall's maiden name was Boyer. She was the child of a rich American family from Boston, but she was born in Paris on the 15th of April, 1853, and received in Boston an education that was well cared for and of great quality. In 1879, she married the Dr. Richard Hall, a surgeon of great reputation.
À 42 ans, touchée par la fièvre typhoïde, Mrs. Hall constate des troubles de l'oreille, de l'ouïe. Pour y remédier, son mari lui conseille de pratiquer un instrument avant. Alors, Élise fait choix du saxophone, instrument alors joué en Amérique par de nombreuses femmes et par un pauvre air dans une rue voisine de sa maison.
At the age of 42, having come down with typhoid fever, Mrs. Hall began to have troubles with hearing. And in order to remedy this, her doctor husband advised her to take up the practice of a musical instrument, of a wind instrument. She chose the saxophone, an instrument which at the time was quite popular among a number of women, and that was also played by a neighbor a neighbor nearby.
2 ans plus tard, le docteur Hall meurt, victime d'un cancer. Sa veuve, nantie d'une substantielle fortune, ambitionne d'élever le goût musical des jeunes gens de Boston. Elle crée l'Orchestral Club, un orchestre composé pour moitié de musiciens amateurs et de musiciens professionnels.
2 years later, Dr. Hall died, a victim of an unforeseen malady. His widow, who now was the inheritor of a substantial fortune, was ambitious to use her musical taste and to work with the young people of Boston. She created the Orchestral Club, an orchestra composed half of musicians that were amateurs and half of the musicians were professionals.
Les œuvres avec saxophone faisant défaut, Elise Hall décide de s'en faire écrire.
Because there were few pieces that were written for concert performances for saxophone, Elise Hall decided to have pieces written for her.
Georges Londeix, un Français ami de la famille, oboïste de grand talent, soliste du Grand Orchestre Symphonique de Boston, la conseille utilement.
Georges Londeix, a French friend of the family, oboist of great talent, soloist of the great and famous Symphonic Orchestra of Boston, advised her very wisely.
Entre 1900 et 1920, le saxophone est ainsi entendu, grâce à Mrs. Hall, dans chacun des 25 concerts que donne à Boston l'Orchestral Club, ainsi qu'aux 2 concerts que la saxophoniste donne à Paris en mai 1904 et mai 1905.
Between 1900 and 1920, the saxophone was heard, thanks to Mrs. Hall, in 25 of the concerts that were given by the Boston Orchestral Club, as well as 2 concerts where the saxophonist Mrs. Hall performed in Paris, one in May 1904 and one in May 1905.
Mrs. Hall passe régulièrement ses vacances d'été en France. De passage à Paris, elle rencontre de nombreux compositeurs, dont Gabriel Fauré, Claude Debussy, Vincent d'Indy, Florent Schmitt, André Caplet, Jean Huré. La plupart d'entre eux acceptent d'écrire pour elle une œuvre concertante. Elle forme ainsi au fil des ans un répertoire d'une vingtaine de partitions.
Mrs. Hall came regularly to France for her vacations. While she was in Paris, she met a number of composers, including Gabriel Fauré, Claude Debussy, Vincent d'Indy, Florent Schmitt, André Caplet, Jean Huré. For the most part of them, they accepted to write a concert piece for her. She formed, because of this, a repertoire of about 20 works.
La première rencontre avec Debussy a lieu en 1901. Le compositeur à court d'argent traverse une période de graves et profonds ennuis. Il est publiquement mis à mal par de dramatiques problèmes de divorce.
The first time that she met with Debussy took place in 1901. The composer, who was short of money, was going through a very difficult period in his life. And he as well was publicly put into disrepair by very dramatic problems of divorce with his wife.
Malgré les succès du prélude à l'après-midi d'un faune, Bizet lors de sa triomphale première et de Péléas et Mélisande, Debussy est intimement affecté par des critiques que lui fait notamment Gabriel Fauré à propos des deux danses sacrées profanes pour harpe qui viennent de paraître. La critique lui fait reproche d'user d'une rhétorique orchestrale compliquée, voire absconse.
Despite his great success with the prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun, then followed by Péléas and Mélisande, Debussy was intimately affected by acidic critiques given him by people such as Gabriel Fauré, apropos of his two dances, sacred and profane dances for harp, which had just appeared. The criticism that came to him was a rhetoric that was, his orchestration was too complicated, even obscure.
Tout en composant la mer, Debussy envisage de se lancer dans une voie nouvelle, d'écriture simplifiée.
In the course of writing La Mer, Debussy seems to have decided to take a different approach and move in a different direction with his music.
La pièce avec saxophone qu'il vient d'accepter d'écrire participe à divers titres à cette mutation d'expression. Il s'abstient des changements de mètre et de tempo, du déroulement elliptique des motifs, de la vacillation continue, des explosions dynamiques soudaines. Il use des sonorités claires sans mélange. Il le dit en 1908 à Victor Ségalen, « Je m'efforce d'employer chaque timbre à l'état de pureté comme Mozart par exemple. »
Debussy went about taking this new route with the kind of sound he was going to use. He was writing a piece for saxophone that was going to have sonorities that were clear without being mixed. As he said to Victor Ségalen at the time, I'm employing each timbre with an effect of purity, as if Mozart were using it, for example. He was looking to be able to create an art that was free from notably the influence of German and Italian composers. After Rameau, he said, we don't really have a tradition which is really French. We need to adopt a type of writing. We have adopted a type of writing which is contrary to our spirit.
Debussy cherche de plus à créer un art débarrassé notamment des influences allemandes et italiennes. Depuis Rameau, dit-il, nous n'avons plus de tradition nettement française, nous avons adopté des procédés d'écriture les plus contraires à notre esprit. Le compositeur, hélas, ignore pratiquement tout des possibilités du saxophone. Rien n'est là pour l'aider à s'instruire en la matière. Aucun saxophoniste ne l'éclaire. Les concerts que donne à Paris Élise Hall sont affligeants. Les auditeurs, parmi lesquels se trouve l'élite de la musique française, sont amenés à se moquer ouvertement du maigre talent musical de la dame saxophoniste.
The composer Debussy, alas, was quite ignorant of all the practical possibilities of the saxophone. It was it was something that he needed to learn about. There was no saxophonist that could clearly show him how this would be. Concerts that were given in Paris that were presided at were not really of an important stature. The listeners among whom we find the elite of French music were taken to overtly mock the kind of music and the meager talent of such a musician such as Elise Hall.
Aucune partition concertante pour saxophone ne peut informer valablement le grand musicien. Les deux concertos de Paul Gilson, abandonnés au silence des inédits, lui sont inconnus, des deux concertos qui datent du début du siècle, de 1900. Les seules pièces que Debussy a l'occasion d'entendre sont Chorale variée de Vincent d'Indy et Légende d'André Caplet.
There were really no concert pieces that Debussy could have learned from in this time period. There were two concertos that were written by the Belgian composer Paul Gilson, but they were abandoned to silence because of the fact they weren't published and weren't available, and they were completely unknown. The only pieces that Debussy had the occasion to hear would have been the Chorale variée by Vincent d'Indy and the Legend by André Caplet.
On va écouter un extrait du concerto de Gilson qui date du début du XXe siècle et qui ne sera connu qu'au milieu après 1960, après 1970.
We're going to listen to an example, number 4, by Paul Gilson. It's the first concerto. It's going to be performed by Norbert Nosy. This concerto was written in 1902, but was not really heard about by virtually anyone until the mid-1960s.
Un extrait du Chorale variée de Vincent d'Indy, qui est une œuvre dont on est sûr que Debussy a entendu.
Another piece that Debussy would have heard would have been the Chorale variée by Vincent d'Indy. We're going to listen to an excerpt, number 5, from that.
soliste du choral varié, il est peut-être parmi vous, c'est Johannes Ernst.
The soloist in the work we just heard is one amongst us here at the Congress is saxophonist Johannes Ernst.
Le 17 août 1903, Debussy cède à Durand les droits d'édition de Rhapsodie pour saxophone et orchestre, en cours de composition. 2 ans plus tard, la femme saxophone réclamant poliment sa fantaisie, Debussy se met en devoir de terminer sa partition. La chose est faite en 1908, année du mariage du compositeur avec Emma Moïse. Le manuscrit est envoyé aux USA à la commanditaire. Un pesant et incompréhensible silence recouvre ce manuscrit inconnu des biographes qui considèrent l'œuvre comme inachevée.
The 17th of August 1903, Debussy signed over his rights to Durand, the publishers, for a rhapsody for saxophone and orchestra that was in the process of being written. 2 years later, La Femme Saxophone, the female saxophonist, politely wanted to claim her fantasy from Debussy and wanted to know if he had completed the work that she'd commissioned. The work was in fact completed in 1908, the year that Debussy married Emma Moïse. The manuscript was sent to the United States to the commissioner, Mrs. Hall. A very weighty and incomprehensible silence fell over this manuscript, which was unknown to the biographers of Debussy, who considered this work an incomplete work that just didn't exist.
Debussy meurt le 25 mars 1918 à l'âge de 56 ans.
Debussy died at the age of 56 years on the 25th of March 1918.
Emma Debussy, sa veuve, incite Durand à éditer les œuvres inédites du maître.
Emma Debussy, his widow, contacted Durand, the publisher, and asked about publishing the unpublished works of the master Debussy.
Jean-Roger Ducasse est chargé de mettre clairement au propre la rhapsodie, comme Debussy a précédemment demandé de le faire André Caplet pour le martyre de Saint-Sébastien, à Charles Coeclin pour Cama ou Henri Busser pour Printemps.
Jean-Roger Ducasse was charged with putting clearly into publishable material the Rhapsody for saxophone, as Debussy had asked to do the similar kinds of things from André Caplet when he put into clear writing the Martyr of Saint Sebastian, or like when he asked Charles Kirkland to rewrite in great clarity Karma, or when he asked Henry Busser to write Printemps clearly.
Rhapsodie avec saxophone principal paraît chez Durand à moins d'un an après la mort de Debussy en 1919.
Rhapsody with saxophone, with principal saxophone, appeared published by Durand less than a year later in 1919.
L'œuvre est aussitôt jouée à Paris, le 11 mai 1919, salle Gaveau, par l'orchestre de la Société nationale placé sous la direction d'André Caplet. La partie de saxophone est tenue par Yves Mayer, clarinette basse de l'orchestre de l'opéra, neveu du Mayer dont on a entendu un extrait tout à l'heure, dont on a parlé tout à l'heure, qui était mort une vingtaine d'années plus tôt.
The work was premiered quite soon in Paris on the 11th of May 1919 in Salle Gaveau by the orchestra of the National Society under the direction of André Caplet. The part of the saxophone was performed by Yves Meyer, who was the bass clarinet player from the orchestra of the opera, who was the nephew of Louis Meyer, who had died 20 years earlier.
L'œuvre est également programmée aux États-Unis, à Philadelphie, le 22 avril 1927 par l'orchestre Léopold Stokowski et jouée par le clarinettiste saxophoniste Frédéric Parme.
The work was also performed in the United States in Philadelphia, the 22nd of April 1927, by the orchestra, by the Leopold Stokowski Orchestra, and it was played by the clarinetist and saxophonist Frédéric Parma.
Malgré d'excellentes critiques, La pièce, suspectée de n'être pas entièrement de Debussy, passe pendant des décennies pour un projet non entièrement avenu. 20 ans plus tard, en 1980, Henry Albright, éminent musicologue belge, répète faussement: la rhapsodie avec saxophone ne fut jamais terminée ni orchestrée par Debussy.
Despite the excellent criticisms received in the press for this work, the piece was suspected of not being entirely by Debussy, and for decades everyone went on thinking that this was true, that the piece was not completed by Debussy. 20 years later, in 1980, Harry Halbrecht, an eminent musicologist from Belgium, repeated, just as everyone else had done before, that the Rhapsody with saxophone was not completed, nor was it orchestrated by Debussy. This was falsely stated.
Dès lors, la pièce n'est pratiquement plus programmée.
And because of that, the piece was practically never programmed again.
Les silences prolongés du saxophone dans plusieurs passages de l'œuvre et le rôle souvent secondaire du soliste déconcertent les saxophonistes eux-mêmes. La déception est imputée à Roger Ducasse, pour qui le saxophone était également inconnu.
The prolonged silence of the saxophone in numerous passages in the work, and the role that's often considered secondary as a soloist, not a concert artist, was derided by saxophonists themselves. This deception was blamed on Roger Ducasse, who was also quite unknown and not complicit.
Pendant plusieurs décennies, rien d'autre ne se produit au sujet de l'œuvre. On note toutefois la dissolution de l'orchestre à Clude de Burton, puis la mort de sa présidente, à qui sa famille reproche une conduite excentrique et l'engagement artistique, sinon financier, excessif et extravagant.
During a number of decades, we heard very little of this work. Well, we can note, though, that the dissolution of the Orchestra Club of Paris, then the death of the president, Mrs. Hall, was followed also by a reproach for her conduct, which was considered eccentric, and that her artistic engagement, and particularly financial engagement, was excessive and extravagant.
Personne ne relève l'existence du manuscrit holographe conservé à Boston.
No one knew of the existence of the holographic manuscript, which was conserved in a safe place in Boston.
Des années passent.
Years and years passed.
À l'approche de 1962, année du centenaire de la naissance de Debussy, les éditions Durand préparent le catalogue exhaustif des œuvres du maître.
At the beginning of 1962, the publishers Durand were preparing a complete works edition of the works of Debussy.
À l'égal d'autres saxophonistes, je pense moi aussi, que la déconsidération de la rhapsodie est due à la méconnaissance par Roger Ducasse de l'instrument principal.
Many interpreters, such as myself and others, thought that the piece was in fact not well considered, primarily to the poor knowledge of Roger Ducasse and his use of the principal instrument in the work.
Je réussis à convaincre l'éditeur de demander à Alfred Desenclos, compositeur émérite du saxophone et debussiste convaincu, de réaliser une nouvelle version de cette rhapsodie. Desenclos accepte.
I was able to convince the publishers to ask Alfred de Desenclos, the well-known composer for saxophone and a very convinced Debussyist himself, a well-read Debussyist, to create a new version of the Rhapsody.
Desenclos accepte et
Desenclos accepted this.
Commence alors la recherche des manuscrits aux éditions Durand et à la Bibliothèque nationale de Paris. L'investigation est très vite arrêtée. La similitude graphique des écritures est telle qu'il est pratiquement impossible de discerner ce qui est écrit par la main de Debussy de ce qu'il est de la main de Roger Ducasse.
So when Desenclos accepted the task of rewriting the Rhapsody, he started researching immediately the manuscripts that were available in the editions of the publisher, but also in the Bibliothèque Nationale de Paris. The investigation was very quickly stopped, however, because of the very graphic nature that was similar of both Debussy and Roger Ducasse. It was very difficult to tell the handwriting of one from the other.
Tout s'éclaire 20 ans plus tard, quand William Street, travaillant à sa thèse sur Elise Hall, découvre le manuscrit holographe de la Rhapsodie signé par Debussy dans la bibliothèque du New England Conservatory de Boston.
20 years later, this was cleared up when William Street, me, I was working on my thesis on the subject of Elise Hall, and I discovered the holographic manuscript of the Rhapsody, which was signed by Claude Debussy in the library of the New England Conservatory in Boston.
Premier constat, l'édition Durand datée de 1919 est exactement conforme au manuscrit holographe.
First fact, the published edition dated 1919 conforms exactly to this holographic manuscript.
Second constat, Roger Ducasse, rigoureusement assujetti aux informations notées par Debussy, n'est en fait responsable que de l'effectif orchestral de l'œuvre. Il le choisit proche de celui de la mère, les bois par 3 et 2 et les cuivres par 3 et 4.
A second fact is Roger Ducasse rigorously took the simple notations of Debussy, and he was responsible for making the instrumentation, the orchestral instrumentation of the work, fit according to what were the habits of Debussy. He chose the closest one to this, which was the orchestration of La Mer, where the woodwinds are by 3s and 2s, and the brass are by 3s and 4s.
Dès lors, convaincu de l'authenticité de l'œuvre, je me suis efforcé de comprendre le pourquoi de la singularité de cette pièce.
With this in mind, I was convinced of the originality of the work. I decided to try and understand better why it had this singularity to it.
La particelle holographe conservée au fond Elise Hall de la bibliothèque du New England Conservatory de Boston se présente sous forme d'une réduction d'orchestre pour soliste et piano.
The holographic manuscript conserved in the library from the Library of Elise Hall in the library of the New England Conservatory in Boston showed that the form of the original work itself was a simple reduction for soloist and piano, sort of a short score.
La page titre, signée par Debussy, est ainsi rédigée. Esquisse d'une rhapsodie mauresque pour orchestre et saxophone principal à Madame Elise Hall avec l'hommage respectueux de Claude Debussy, 1901-1908.
The title page, which is signed by Debussy, is also carries a title, a sketch of a Moorish rhapsody for orchestra and principal saxophone to Madame Elise Hall, with the respectful homage of Claude Debussy and the date 1901 to 1908.
Suivent 14 pages numérotées. Chaque page est formée de 4 systèmes de 4 lignes chacun, en clé de sol et de fa. Les entrées instrumentales, articulations, modes de jeu et nuances sont notées à bon escient. Par contre, les mesures allant de 309 à 334 entre les pages 11 et 12 sont sans accompagnement. Seule est notée la partie de saxophone. Le passage ayant déjà été traité dans la partition, Debussy, à son habitude, néglige d'écrire ce qu'un copiste pouvait écrire à sa place.
The 14 pages of this manuscript that were written by Debussy were numbered. Each page had four staves four systems of four staves each in the clefs of G and F. And at every instrumental entrance, the articulations, the type of playing, the dynamics were noted and were very conscientiously marked. On the other hand, the measures between 309 and 334, written on the pages 11 and 12, were without accompaniment, only noted there as a part of the saxophone. This passage was already treated earlier in the piece. It was the same music. Debussy, as he had done before, neglected to write on purpose what a copyist could have done in his place.
Le mot esquisse, placé en titre de la partition, porte à confusion. S'il désigne pour tout un chacun une œuvre à l'état de projet, il désigne là, comme dans d'autres œuvres de Debussy, un ensemble de notations fixant une impression première dans son caractère instantané. On remarque cet emploi à la même époque. Dans le titre de La Mer, 3 esquisses symphoniques, et dans celui de Cahier d'esquisses pour piano, publié tout d'abord sous le simple titre Esquisse.
The word sketch, placed at the beginning of this piece of music, has helped to create a lot of confusion. It's been used, it's meant to say that the work was part of a project. It's designed this way as done with other works by Debussy. It's an ensemble of notations that are a fixed impression, like the character of a true stamp. It's an impression that's done. We can remark that this type of employing this technique was the same kind that he used for La Mer, which he also subtitled 3 symphonic sketches, or a notebook of sketches for piano, published in the beginning under the simple title Sketches.
D'autres observations sont à relever à propos du titre. Rhapsodie mauresque. Le mot rhapsodie, correctement écrit avec un H sur le manuscrit holographe, est inscrit sans H dans l'édition Durand. Autre question à propos du qualificatif mauresque, qui, à l'écoute de la pièce, paraît esthétiquement sans objet, ou alors dans un sens exotique qui nous échappe.
Other observations that come to mind from the title are the title Rhapsody, R-H-A-P-S-O-D-I-E, Mauresque. The word rhapsody, correctly spelled with an H on the original manuscript in Boston, the holographic manuscript in Boston, is written without an H in the edition published by Durand. Another question apropos of the qualification Mauresque or Moorish, that on hearing this piece is not aesthetically very apparent. It could be just an exotic sense that escapes us in our understanding.
Nous ignorons qui a modifié le titre.
We weren't very aware that the title had been modified.
Le mot rhapsodie n'évoque pas moins, d'une part, le rhapsodos antique, chanteur, conteur, allant de ville en ville en disant des poèmes. D'autre part, une pièce instrumentale de style et de forme libre, assez proche de la fantaisie, de l'improvisation, dans laquelle apparaissent généralement des thèmes et des effets empruntés aux musiques vocales nationales, régionales, traditionnelles.
The word rhapsody evokes on one part the source of this word rhapsodos, which means antique, old-fashioned, as if a singer or a storyteller who would be going from city to city would be singing or saying his poems. On another side, it could be an instrumental piece of a style or of a free form that was very close to a fantasy and an improvisation, in which appeared generally themes and effects that were taken from vocal music that were national, regional, or traditional.
Nous ignorons pourquoi ce manuscrit de Boston, signé par Debussy, est inexplicablement ignoré des exégètes du compositeur, partisans de l'œuvre inachevée.
It's also quite confusing why this manuscript in Boston, which is signed by the composer, is inexplicably ignored by the followers of the composer, who were partisans who agreed that the work was incomplete.
Ce précieux manuscrit montre que si l'on peut s'interroger sur la façon de traiter l'orchestration de l'œuvre, il n'y a pas lieu de douter de l'authenticité entière de l'ouvrage.
This very precious manuscript shows us that when we ask the right questions in the right way about the treating of the orchestration of the work, there's no question of the authenticity of the complete entire work by Debussy.
Comme le confirme François Le Sur, spécialiste mondial de Debussy, il y a abus à prétendre que Roger Ducasse a achevé l'œuvre. Il est plus juste de parler de mise au point pour la gravure.
As confirmed, the librarian of the Bibliothèque Nationale of France, François Le Sur, an eminent specialist in the music of Debussy, that there was an abuse pretending that Roger Ducasse had completed the work. It's a word that doesn't speak well of this. He more or less made the work ready to be printed.
Moi aussi, frustré à l'époque de n'avoir pas de Debussy une œuvre plus significative du saxophone, je restais fasciné par cette rhapsodie au charme si particulier.
I as well was very frustrated during this time period to not have a piece by Debussy, which was a work that was significant for the saxophone. Yet I still remain fascinated by this rhapsody, which had such an individual charm.
Ne doutant plus de son authenticité, j'acceptais l'œuvre telle qu'elle se présentait en m'efforçant de comprendre pourquoi cette forme singulière.
No longer doubting the authenticity of the work, I accepted that the work was what it was, and I forced myself to try to understand more about the very individual form of this piece.
Je savais que Marcel Proust, dans À la recherche du temps perdu, parlait à plusieurs reprises du vif intérêt que Debussy portait aux cris de Paris.
I knew that the writer Marcel Proust, in a book it's called Researching Lost Time, spoke numerous times of the very lively interest that Debussy carried for what were called the cries of Paris, or the calls of Paris, of the working classes.
Les cris sont des appels moitié chantés, moitié criés, lancés dans les rues, encore à cette époque, par les petits marchands ambulants, colporteurs et camelots. C'est avec ces cris particuliers que les marchands ambulants d'autrefois manifestaient leur présence, ainsi que la nature de leur commerce.
The cries of Paris, the street cries, are ways that are calls that are half sung, half cried out, thrown into the street, especially in this time period, by small walking merchants traveling the streets, and they were carrying their chariots, trying to sell their wares, and each had a very particular call that was related to their profession. They were walking, they were moving along, and their presence was manifested by the nature of the individual thing that they were selling.
Curieux de savoir en quoi consistaient ces appels, je consultais les ouvrages spécialisés sur le sujet existant à l'époque de Debussy. Je tombais sur Les Voix de Paris de Georges Castaner.
I was curious to understand what these calls consisted of, and I consulted numerous works on the subject that existed in the time of Debussy, and I fell upon a book which was called Les Voix de Paris, The Voices of Paris, by Georges Castaner.
En parcourant ce savant et copieux ouvrage, quelle ne fut pas ma surprise d'y trouver des formules qui correspondaient exactement à certains fragments des mélodies de la rhapsodie avec saxophone. Cris de porteurs d'eau, de cordonniers, de marchands de lunettes, de légumes, de fleurs, de guetteurs de fiacres.
While I was looking through this very, very complete and thick book, to my surprise, I came upon a number of small formulas of writing that corresponded exactly to certain fragments of the melodies that were in the Rhapsody with saxophone. There were the call of the water carrier, the call of the shoe repairman, the call of the person who sold eyeglasses, the person who sold vegetables, the person who sold flowers. Le goûteur de fiacre, qu'est-ce que c'est?
Celui qui appelle, comme on appelle un taxi, il appelait un appel de fiacre, de voiture à cheval.
Okay, so someone calling for transportation.
Alors par exemple, le cri du marchand d'eau.
For example, the caller for the person who sold water.
Allô? Allô?
Come and get your water. Get your water.
Le loueur de service.
Someone who is
Je propose pour des travaux familiers.
someone who is selling their services, selling their ability to work for you.
Voilà l'ouvrier. Voilà l'ouvrier. Le marchand de lorgnettes.
The seller of glasses, eyeglasses.
Le marchand de lorgnettes. Voilà les lorgnettes. Lorgnettes. Le marchand de lorgnettes. Voilà les lorgnettes. Lorgnettes.
I'm selling glasses. Glasses. Get your glasses.
Le marchand d'éponges.
The person who sold sponges.
Marchand d'éponges. Marchand d'éponges.
I'm the seller of sponges.
Le marchand de légumes frais.
The salesperson for fresh vegetables.
Pommes, jardiniers au buisseau, dessous le car. Pommes, jardiniers au buisseau, dessous le car. Un cri de batelier pour la traversée de l'eau, pour la traversée du fleuve.
The cry of the person who would take you across the water.
Ohé! Ohé! Le crieur de fiacre.
Je connais pas ça.
C'est le même pour appeler l'appel le taxi à cheval.
Okay. Again, the calling for a taxi that was horse-driven.
Whip! Whip! Le marchand d'oignons.
The seller of onions.
Voilà du bel oignon, un sous la botte. Voilà du bel oignon, de un sous la botte.
Here are some really nice onions.
Le cri du cocher.
The cry of the cocher.
Et hop! Et hop! Le marchand de fleurs.
The seller of flowers.
Fleurissez-vous, fleurissez-vous, fleurissez-vous. Fleurissez-vous, fleurissez-vous, fleurissez-vous.
Flower yourself. Cover yourself in flowers.
Même si Claude Debussy n'a pas eu connaissance du savant ouvrage de Kastner, édité 50 ans plus tôt, il est vraisemblable qu'il a entendu sous ses fenêtres des cris du même type.
Even if Claude Debussy didn't know about this very intellectual book by Castor, which had been published 50 years before, it's most likely that Debussy would have heard these cries from the window of his bedroom, because this is what was taking place in the streets of Paris.
En effet, avant la Première Guerre mondiale, les rues des grandes villes étaient encore animées de cet appel populaire. Certains d'entre eux ont été utilisés dans des œuvres savantes au cours des siècles passés, notamment par Jeannequin et Rameau.
In effect, even before the First World War, in the streets of the large cities, there were still people that were going along doing this kind of work and creating concert works using significant elements from society. Composers and writers such as Jeannequin and Romo did this very same thing.
De ces éléments bruts, Debussy paraît avoir particulièrement retenu l'ambitus étroit des intervalles mélodiques, le passage fréquent du binaire au ternaire, la répétition de motifs non concluants, l'utilisation de petites notes de passage avec la non-symétrie des carrures, le caractère idiomatique des tournures.
The very brute, simple elements that were popular at this time, Debussy was able to particularly hang on to the ideas of a very small range of melodic intervals. The passages were frequently changing from binary to ternary rhythms. The repetition of motives that didn't conclude in a tonal fashion. The utilization of grace notes or passing tones with non-symmetric shapes. The idiomatic character of turns of phrase.
Debussy décrit fort bien son travail dans cette œuvre en parlant d'Isaac Albéniz. Il utilise, dit-il, les thèmes populaires comme quelqu'un qui en a bu et entendu jusqu'à les faire passer dans sa musique sans qu'on puisse s'apercevoir de la ligne de démarcation. On se souvient aussi du voyage en Russie au cours duquel Debussy est séduit par le jeu musical des tziganes, donnant l'exemple d'une musique sans règlement.
Debussy cried out in his work, speaking about the work of Isaac Albéniz, who said, utilize the popular themes as if they were something that you drank and something that you've heard, up to the point that they just develop into your music, where they're perceived without a line of demarcation from the natural into the artistic. Often, we can also remark that on his trip to Russia, where Debussy was seduced by the musical playing of the Gypsies, where they gave examples of music without rules.
Rhapsodie est précisément un exemple de musique sans règlement, une sorte d'improvisation libre et spontanée entre chant et danse, capable de désarmer ses détracteurs qui reprochent à sa musique, surtout après la mer, de devenir par trop complexe. C'est, partant des simples cris populaires, une façon d'élaborer une musique d'esprit nationale, usant d'une écriture volontairement aisée à comprendre.
Rhapsody is precisely the type of example of music without rules, a sort of improvisation that's spontaneous between the idea of song and dance, susceptible to disarm Debussy's detractors, who frequently found that his music was too complex, especially in comparison with things like Le Maire. This type of writing, using these popular cries and according to the wishes of a certain way of elaborating the music, essentially, which was a national kind of music, and coming back to forms of writing that were consciously and voluntarily simplified.
Cette rhapsodie est aussi l'occasion de répondre d'élégante façon à Gustave Charpentier qui, en 1900, a employé des cris de Paris dans son opéra Louise. La critique qu'en fait alors Debussy est cinglante. Comme un sale prix de Rome, écrit-il à Pierre-Louis, Charpentier fait des cris des cantilènes chlorotiques sous des harmonies dont je dirais qu'elles sont parasites pour être poli.
The Rhapsody is also an occasion, it's also an opportunity for us to respond elegantly in a way to the music of Gustave Charpentier, who in 1900 also employed the cries of Paris, the street cries of Paris, in his opera Louise. Critiques that wrote about him said it's like the dirty prize of Rome, said Pierre Louis of Charpentier. These cries, these cantilens, these glorified songs under harmonies that I would say are parasitical, just to be polite.
Debussy, soucieux encore de faire une musique sans règlement, refuse de se servir des cris à des fins décoratives ou exotiques. Il en fait des éléments intrinsèques du langage. Il ne faut, disait-il encore, se servir de la musique populaire de son pays que comme base, jamais comme un moyen d'écriture.
Debussy was worried about his writing, about making music without rules. He refused to use these cries in a decorative or exotic fashion. He used them as an intrinsic type of language, where one could say that they served popular music in a way that was never a type of writing. They were intrinsic to the writing itself.
Autre influence conséquente dans cette partition, celle de Massenet, dont Debussy apprécie le rôle du saxophone dans Werther. C'est manifestement à cet ouvrage qu'il se réfère en privilégiant le timbre et la tessiture contralto du saxophone et en cantonnant l'instrument principal au chant, exclusivement, sciemment, excluant toute activité, toute attachée à la danse.
Another consequential influence on this rhapsody is that of the work of Massenet and how it affected Debussy, who appreciated very much the role of the saxophone as it was used in Werther.
On va écouter un extrait de cette rhapsodie dont je suis coupable et qui met en œuvre précisément les cris que j'ai trouvés dans le Castaner.
We're going to hear an excerpt from this rhapsody by Debussy. The person culpable here is me, Jean-Marie Londeix, as soloist with the Orchestre National de France.
Le langage particulier dont Debussy use dans Rhapsodie avec saxophone se retrouve dans son ultime mélodie de 1915, dans le Noël des enfants qui n'ont plus de maison.
The very particular language that Debussy uses in the Rhapsody with saxophone, we find as well in the next to last melody that he wrote in 1915, which is called Christmas for Children That Don't Have Homes.
Au début du XXe siècle, entre 1901 et 1908, au moment où Debussy travaille à cette rhapsodie, les jazzmen n'ont pas encore adopté le saxophone. L'instrument est alors considéré par nombre de musiciens sérieux comme impropre à son utilisation dans des œuvres musicalement ambitieuses.
At the time that Debussy wrote this piece, the jazz didn't really exist, and the idea of jazz saxophone was inconsequential and not even a possibility. It wasn't adopted as an instrument. Saxophonists that were qualified to play were by default who they were. The real possibilities of the instrument were those that were unknown. They were just being discovered. They were the ones that were declared by Hector Berlioz in his famous orchestration on his treatise on orchestration.
Les saxophonistes qualifiés font à ce moment-là défaut. Les réelles possibilités de l'instrument restent méconnues, hormis les facultés signalées par Hector Berlioz dans son fameux traité d'instrumentation et d'orchestration.
So these ideas of what the saxophone could be were really unknown at the time, and they were just being explored by Debussy.
Nous voyons maintenant que Rhapsodie est loin d'être négligeable. Il s'agit d'une œuvre majeure du répertoire concertant du saxophone et une œuvre significative du grand compositeur français.
You can see now that the Rhapsody is far from being something that's negligible, that we should forget. It is one of the major works in the repertory of the concert saxophone, and it's a significant work of the great French composer.
C'est à ce double titre que cette œuvre mérite la considération particulière des mélomanes et notamment des saxophonistes si rarement pourvus d'œuvres majeures.
It's with these two ideas of it being a true concert work of one of the greatest of the French composers that it merits particularly the attention of music lovers, in particular saxophonists who rarely come into contact with major works.
Cette rhapsodie est en quelque sorte le premier chef-d'œuvre marquant à jamais le répertoire vivant du saxophone de concert.
It's almost simple to say that this is perhaps the first work of art that was ever created for the concert saxophone.
Qu'Elise Hall en soit remerciée, ainsi que Debussy, et que grâce à vous, vive le saxophone.
So we thank Elise Hall for her contribution. We thank you for your attention. Long live Debussy, long live the saxophone.